Tottenham get Champions League, they'll have financially a big summer. Do you predict that?
Yeah, I said that I think that there'll be a club's highest earner and a club or a club transfer record this summer if Tottenham win the Champions League. I still think there'll be a new club's highest earner anyway.
Well, regardless, even if we wouldn't lose in next week,
surely there's going to have to be, with the amount of wages we've got off the book. Timo Werner leaving as well this summer. You know, so much wages have gone over the past year. You know, last 2 years.
Yeah,
there just has to be, surely.
I was kind of like, I was really hoping that Tottenham would sell Romero, and not that I really want him to go, but if he looks like he's going to go, how do you go about replacing him? And I thought the smartest decision would have been to go and get Jonathan Tah, free transfer, and you make him the club's highest earner. And that ticks that box so that I'm not in the mud.
Sounds like he's going to buy him.
Yeah, sounds like he's going to Bayern Munich. But there's other players out there, and you know that we can. I think that this year's free transfer list is the juiciest it has been for a long time. There's a lot of good players on that out of contract.
Who's on there? Who's on there?
Pulisic is on there. Aino from Nottingham Forest. Kenny Tete. Obviously Kevin De Bruyne. Jonathan Tah. Ben Davies. Obviously Eric Von Dyer. I know he's gone to Monaco now. When I did that article, when I did that video, it was about a month ago. There's probably like 10 players that I think are competent. I think Boscagli as well. I think Boscagli, I'm not sure how you say it. He's a really decent centre back that can play up the left hand side as well.
Jonathan David, of course. Yeah, forgot about him. I mean,
Angel Gomez. Yeah.
Angel Gomez. Yeah. There's a lot of talent out there, right? And I'd actually imagine that Tottenham will probably go for Angel. I'm not sure I really want Angel Gomez. If I'm entirely honest, I'm not a huge fan of his. I think he's okay, but he's a bit of like a kind of he's a kind of a bit of an everything guy, like a jack of all trades. But I'm not sure if he's the master of one, and if he's going to come in and be the kind of, I don't know, are we going to play with a double 8 next year or a 6? That's not how I see him. But Jonathan David obviously clearly would be the number. Like, I think that makes so much sense, right? So if you can find a way to get that done, then he'll be the new highest earner for sure at the club. And I think he'd be brilliant. He'd be a brilliant sort of tandem with Solanke. I think it'd be sensational. So
where are you at, Sean, with the Tel situation? Like, do we sign him? I know it'll probably be a lower fee than the 50 million quoted in the summer. But I mean, from what you've seen so far, do you have high hopes that maybe he probably obviously can improve because he's a young player. But from what you've seen so far, is that enough to suggest, we should be spending the money on him?
Certainly not a 50 million quid. Obviously not, like 100% no. If that's the sticking point, then see you later. I'm in probably the unpopular camp on this one, like usual. But like, I genuinely do look at Mathys Tel and think that he's got something about him. Although I had a debate, it wasn't even a debate to be honest, because I sort of acknowledged that the data and the stats don't support my argument. If you look at the stats, he doesn't look like he creates very much, but stats only tell you a no context story. So, but I look at the player and I see a guy who works really hard. He's got a point to prove. And I think that he's demonstrated enough to me to think that there's something there. So I'd like to see him at the club next season, as long as it didn't, mean that it gobbled up a large slice of whatever budget we have. If we could make the deal another loan deal, or a very cheap initial fee with a huge sell-on fee, like a percentage going to Bayern, whatever. If you can make it work so that it doesn't absorb too much of the budget, then I like him. I do. The other question, I guess, the other part of the conversation is: does he cop block other players in our youth system? And I think there's definitely an argument to say that maybe he does. We've got enough wingers on that side of the pitch, but just as a player, generally, I do really like him, and he's got a lot. He's very raw. He's got a lot to improve on, but I see something in him that the stats don't validate. But just on my gut instinct, I like him. What do you guys think?
Just before I tell you my opinion, but who do you think's shown more this season on a whole, him or Mikey Moore?
Mathys Tel, for sure.
So I think Mikey Moore's shown more.
I just, people think that I've got this, like, I don't like Mikey Moore. I do. I really want him to be good, and I think he's done glimpses. But I just think that just because he's 17 and one of our own, that means that we have to give him, we put him in a special category. And I'm not like that. I'm like, if you're good enough, you're old enough. But when you're old enough, you're then compared to everybody else that's competing for your position. And I just don't think that he's ready yet. I don't think that he's shown me enough
But he's in his best performance, Sean, in again Alkmaar, Ferencváros in the Europa League group stages. Like, we haven't seen anywhere close to that from Mathys Tel.
I think Mathys Tel has been wildly underrated by people. Again, I know I'm in the minority. I know that 9 out of 10
have we seen
people...
that level of performance that we saw from Mikey Moore in those games? I don't think we have.
I don't know. I mean, it's a subjective thing, mate. I'm not going to sit here and tell you anyone's right or wrong about it. I personally see. I think that, you know, against West Ham and a team that no one cared. I think he cared, and I think that ball that he split through, you know, an inch to the right or left to Odebear's tap in, and it hit someone's foot, right? So he spread that through the eye of a needle. I thought that was impressive. As I say, I think that when he came on the pitch, I think against Liverpool, I thought he was sort of busting a lung to. I think his work rate. Again, I know that people think that work rate is irrelevant unless there's output, but like, I look at people like Dominic Solanke and think that a lot of Dominic Solanke's output is recognised in players like Brennan Johnson's numbers, because Brennan Johnson doesn't get the space that he gets or the time that he gets if Dom Solanke's not working tirelessly. And I think you could make, I would make a similar argument for Mathys Tel. I think work rate is important, especially in a system that is kind of organised around workhorses. You only got a little bit of space for show ponies. And I don't think Mathys Tel is a show pony. I think Mathys Tel works really hard. And I think he does have skill. And I think he's definitely rough and raw and makes mistakes with his decision-making at the end. But there's something about him. Again, I can't really justify it apart from to say just like that's how I feel. I just, you know, I like him as a player. And I think he'll be a good player for Tottenham.
Yeah, I like him too. I agree. I also agree we need to renegotiate that fee. But I think there's a few games. The first one, he's been improving as kind of time's gone on. He's only been here a few months. You got to remember, like I was saying, like, you know, someone like Bergvall, like it took him 6 months to really adapt before we saw really him consistently playing well. And I think Tel obviously hasn't been afforded that time because we have to make a judgment a lot quicker on Tel than we did on Bergvall, who's obviously got a longer contract. But I think since he's come in, when he first came and he was playing up front and he was out of position in an injury-riddled team, it was very, very difficult for him to influence games. I do think he's been getting better, but you know, obviously, if you're making a judgment based on what we've seen, you know, it's hard to justify spending a massive amount of money on him just based on what we've seen in these few games that he's played, because he hasn't really like hit the ground running, or he hasn't really scored many goals, or he hasn't really made that much of an impact in quite a lot of games. But I think under the circumstances, as the games have gone on, I do think he's been getting better and better, impacting games more. And you got to remember, he's still a teenager. And I think you got to remember, like, there's not, you know, as a teenager, before doing that in the Premier League, people overlook that because we're looking to spend a lot of money on him. But it's still impacting games as a player of his age. And I think that goes kind of overlooked, and because he's, you know, we're judging him as if he's like a player maybe who's more experienced at an older age, because that's kind of how we have to, given the small sample size and small time we have to judge him on. But if you just judge him as a teenager performing in the Premier League, I think he's doing pretty good.
But that's what he's come in as. He's come in as a 6 month loan spell that's supposed to make an instant impact. That's
correct.
What he's come in as.
That's what I'm saying. That's why we're judging him like that. I agree. Yeah.
That's what his purpose is.
Well, not necessarily. If he's here
he came in to make an instant impact because we had injuries and.
No, I agree with that. But if he's here long term, then it won't matter how we did in his first.
Let me put it this way, yeah. If we go into next season with Mathys Tel, Sonny, Moore, like the wingers that we have now into the Champions League and try and get us in the top 4 next season, is it good enough? No, and what more do we need to make it good enough?
No, you need a top draw forward this summer. I like a Jonathan David playing in the 9, or I know this particular name is never going to happen, but someone of the kind of stature of like a Rafinha who can play off the right and can just, you know, has that wow factor, but also the output. If you mix that in with the youth that we have, then I think that there's the opportunity to be able to develop. I'd also argue, I think that, you know, if it's talking about like a day late and a dollar short, always having, you know, the right pieces but at the wrong time. Someone like Ivan Perisic, I know he's no longer now, but he would have been great for some of these young guys to have learned off of.
Have you seen the form this guy's on? Ivan Perisic is mad what he's doing in the Eredivisie.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane, mate. I mean, the guy's built like a machine, right? But he is But it's just, I think that there's a need for someone at the club. And again, I don't necessarily know if Sonny, and this is no disrespect to him, he seems very young at heart and very kind of like playful and happy all the time and stuff. But it doesn't necessarily reflect his age, right? And I feel like I don't know if he's the guy that you can necessarily look to be like a mentor in the same way that you could look at someone like an Ivan Perisic and maybe think that there would be a beneficiary, like a byproduct benefit of having an older sort of statesman around the club that can like sort of distribute some of their experience. But yeah, like with Mathys Tel, I don't know what the right price is, but I think there is a price where it makes sense. But it's certainly nothing like the money that's currently on the table for the negotiation.
Yeah, I feel just like we need a top winger to come out on the left that doesn't need this development from a teenager into a young 20s. I think we need someone in the mid 20s already, or at least someone in the early 20s that's had a lot of experience that can come in and make a real difference right here, right now, as opposed to bedding them in and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I always say that those wingers are 10 a penny. Like in this day and age, like if you're handy, you're fast, you're nippy, and you got some skill, you go to any team, right? And there's always one of those sorts of players. But then I look at players that we've all wanted forever, like a Nico Williams, and I watched him in the in Europe this year, and I was like, he
hasn't had a good season, Nico Williams.
Yeah, he's got hot flashes, if you like, and I just think that you need consistency. You need someone that you can put on the pitch for 70 minutes and just make a difference. Get the ball to him 5 or 6 times, and you know that 50% of them are going to end up with getting to the byline or cutting inside, unpredictable on both feet, and can make things happen. And if the ball does fall to him, he's not going to waste his opportunity. If you could merge the output of like a Brennan Johnson with the input of an Odebear or someone like that, then you might have someone that's really useful. And I used to look around when I was working with Y Scout earlier on the season and last year. I was like, there's so many of these. They're everywhere. Now I look around and I'm still scouring, and I'm like, I'm like, he's not the guy. And I just end up filtering these people out, and I'm left with very few that are realistic opportunities. So it's a difficult decision, but it's one that we need to like work on for this summer because it's an important area of the game and an important area of our team.
We probably need one on the right hand side too. You know what I mean? Like someone to challenge.
I think more so on the right hand side than the left hand side, if I'm honest.
So we're not going to sign 2 established goal scoring wingers, are we?
No, we're not.
The one on the right hand side. I mean, you got to have a look at Brian Mbeumo. I mean, he's probably the one that that would move the goalpost for us.
Yeah, 100%. I'm actually amazed. Like everybody in the Tottenham YouTube space and everybody in the comment section, I've never seen anybody. I mean, there might be 1 or 2 that are doing it now in the chat. I'm not looking at the chat, but I've never seen anybody in any comment on any video ever disagree that Mbeumo would be a brilliant acquisition, not just for us, but for anybody. But yet it's taken 2 or 3 years for him to have even like any noise around his transfer away from Brentford. It's very surprising. And all of a sudden, all the big teams want him. Newcastle want him, Tottenham want him, United want him, Chelsea are looking at it, even though they've got 400 wingers. What about Cherki? Would you take Cherki?
Yeah, 100%. He's absolutely exploded this season. What he's done this year for Lyon has just been incredible, to be honest. You look at the French team of the year, dominated by PSG players. 8 or 9 PSG players in that team of the year, and Ryan Cherki somehow made his way in there. I mean, there's always been, conversations about him, haven't there? So, and no one's ever been convinced. But I think this year he's convinced everyone.
Yeah, I like him a lot.
It'll be a nice dynamic as well. Like if we did to sign Tel, you've got Odebear, Tel, Cherki all playing with each other at youth level internationally as well.
Yeah, that sort of thing is important. Like you don't know what the value of that is, but having your mates around you and stuff can bring out the best of you, right?
I want someone like Yakuba Minte from Brighton.
I would like him. I think he's a top talent, Minte. I really do. I think, he's coming to Brighton. He was forced to leave Newcastle because of PSR and everything like that. Newcastle didn't want to sell him. The fans didn't want him to leave. And he's gone into Brighton, and I think he's had a really good season. I think we'll be lucky to get him. I remember going to Brighton when we were 2-0 up at half-time. That guy was destroying us.
He's good, and I think he's getting better and better as the season's gone on. Yeah. The problem is there is always a number with Brighton. to sell.
Yeah.
It's usually a very big
7
number.
times higher than
It's usually a very big number. That's the thing, yeah. But they will sell, like they're happy to sell, but for a big price. You have to stump up the cash.